wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. I am Penna Dexter, and I'm sitting in for Kirby Anderson today, along with Nick Pitts. We're kind of... it's rare that the two of us do the show together. Kirby's out, and this, Nick, is the normal day, at least until you made a switch to Tuesday, that the Millennial Roundtable sat around this table. It's been going on for over a year now.
It's hard to believe.
It's hard
to believe. The listeners, we thought they would not have the patience to put up with us, but nevertheless, it has been such a joy to be able to help them better understand the millennial perspective on issues that are facing the day, as well as trying to think through what's a Christian perspective on those particular issues. And so I am exceedingly grateful to our listeners for continuing to put up with me, and I am grateful for them.
Well, you know, we play, for those that are listening online, we play commentaries by Kirby and other people during breaks. And today's commentary by Kirby is about millennials. I don't know if you've heard it or read it yet, but I chuckled because it talked about how self-confident your generation is.
Oh, yeah.
And I have three of my own. And I would say that's true. I would say, in a sense, they've been complimented throughout their lives. Starting out with, I remember when they were little in school, there were all these self-esteem type courses. But I think there are a lot of other reasons, of course, that the millennial generation thinks fairly highly of themselves. But what it really translates into often is actually attempting great things.
Yeah, you know, there's a book by the Rayners, put out a book, Tom and Jess Rayner, that kind of document some of the millennial trends. And one of the survey statistics indicates that 94% of millennials think that they can change the world. Now, we've all seen kind of some of the you've got, I call it the American Idol effect, where you have individuals that think they have a great capacity and ability, and in reality, no one has given them a harsh word to tell them that their talents are probably better directed elsewhere. But there are a great many instances where there are millennials that do not only have the wherewithal, but have the capacity to be able to leverage their talents in such a way that it might be beneficial for the world. And so I am all but encouraged. Sometimes I can be self-disparaging as well as disparaging on our generation, but I'm very encouraged by the great gestures and overtures that are being made by millennials to be able to affect change for the glory of God.
Well, a little bit later, we will talk about change that may not be so palatable to our listeners, and one millennial who's actually in Congress. But right now, Nick, I wanted to talk about your vacation because you just got back.
I'm always open to talk about my vacation.
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned to me that you learned something that I think is very important.
Yeah, so for our listeners yesterday that were tuning in, I had the chance to go to Spain this past week and spent the time just doing some reading, ran with the bulls a little bit just because I wanted to check it off my bucket list. But one of the things I was so captivated by was just the stark contrast between my eating patterns here in the U.S. as compared to what was happening in Spain. Here in the U.S., I'm very harried more often than not. If I don't have to sit down with individuals, or I don't have the chance to sit down with individuals, is probably the better way to put it. I will have like a protein bar in my car, or if I'm fast food, and not really spending a lot of time lingering over a meal. But in Spain, it was so interesting just because there was just these long meals that would take place. I often put in my journal, life is too short to not enjoy a long meal. And doing a little reading on it, there was a theologian that said that God's love, food is God's love made edible. of just this idea of just the opportunity that you have, because we all need sustenance of some form or fashion. And those calories that come from food are more than just something that gives us energy, but it reminds us of the fullness of life that Jesus died in order to give us. And so whereas I was eating 20 and 30-minute meals here in the U.S., over there it was 2, 3, 4-hour meals, just with great friends, always talking about the things of life and the mysteries therein. And there was just a richness there that I just, that has still left my mind wondering about and contemplating how I can take that principle and apply it here in the U.S.
Well, I think you can. And, you know, when you look biblically, you see Jesus very often participating with his disciples in meals.
Yeah.
And it was an important time, I think, for just sort of their teaching and learning from him. And, you know, there's something about, I think, when you're doing something, like I always think about when my kids were teenagers, driving was always a good time to talk to them because you weren't staring them in the face. But you're eating, and it's just, you're concentrating on a couple of things. It's less threatening. And I found, my husband and I hosted a small group in our home for several years where we would sit around a meal for 2 or 3 hours. We would not have really another program, and just everyone would bring great food and try really hard to make it good. And we would really cover some territory there. You know,
in the social science research backs up what we anecdotally know to be true. Excuse me. So, like, it's very clear that when the research is clear that when individuals sit down at tables together, children's reading levels go up. They're less likely to do drugs. They're less likely to experiment with alcohol and tobacco. They're less likely to disobey authority. In adults, individuals as well. There's an expansion of the vocabulary. There's increases in levels of empathy, chances of happiness. The research is very clear. There's something very sacred and very beneficial about breaking bread with one another. And this isn't just something that Jesus told us to do. It's also something that social science reveals that we should be doing as well, because there's a benefit to it. And there's a richness that comes through entering into the rhythm that is sharing a meal together.
Yeah, I like the idea of rhythm, Nick. And it's, I think in America, we are so bent on accomplishing a lot of things in any given day. And so we neglect that. And, you know, maybe it can't be that way 3 hours every day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But you could plan for it and make it part of your life.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I think we value in America, and it's a good thing to value, is efficiency. Like, we want to be very efficient. We work significantly long hours, and we want to make sure that we're very efficient during those hours. But I think one of the things that we can't miss out on, though, is to not be able to take into account the best that we can the unintended costs and consequences that could come from just kind of finding the joy in the inefficiency of a long meal. Yes and amen, we need to make sure that we have calories, but there's a hidden gem there that we're missing out on that isn't necessarily a direct result of our participation in it, but as an indirect result, we're blessed by it. It's one of those surprising hidden gems that God has hidden into the crevices of this green earth.
Well, that's a wonderful gem that you're bringing home from your vacation in Spain. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to cover the gamut today from the news and current events, of course, and also to follow up on an interview that we've done. Actually, we've interviewed Tim Winter from Parents Television Council a couple of times recently. We're understanding what's going on in Netflix, HBO, and some of the streaming services. And we want to alert parents about it. We've actually put an action item at pointofview.net. I'll explain it a little bit more after the break. But it's entering into not only understanding some of the threats to the culture and to our next generation, but also being able to do something about it. We've always been about that here at Point of View. We make it very easy, and you won't want to miss our conversation about the show Euphoria with Tim Winter a little bit later. We've got a lot more after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, many members of the millennial generation think they are special. At least that is the conclusion of a recent study of college students. One newspaper report on the study put it this way: If you ask a college freshman today who the greatest generation is, they might respond by pointing in a mirror. The study of college students documented young people's unprecedented level of self-infatuation. Psychologist Gene Twenge found that over the last 4 decades of research on college freshmen, there has been a dramatic rise in self-confidence. For example, they describe themselves as above average in academic ability and in their personal lives. The problem is that there is a stark disconnect between their opinions of themselves and their actual ability. She's found that students suffer from what she calls ambition inflation. As their ambition increases, it reaches levels of unrealistic expectations. She has also found in another study that there has been a 30% increase towards narcissism in students since 1979. The changing culture is part of the reason for this dramatic change. She explains our culture used to encourage modesty and humility and not bragging about yourself. If someone did that in the past, we called that person stuck up or conceited. Today, the culture often rewards such attitudes and behavior. I would also argue that social media encourages and accentuates this trend. Students posting pictures of themselves on Facebook and Instagram, uploading videos on YouTube, and leaving numerous comments on Twitter receive positive feedback for such behavior. These technologies provide additional vehicles to feed their narcissism. These studies remind us that this generation needs guidance from pastors and parents so that they can apply biblical principles of success, humility, and self-image. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter in studio with Nick Pitts, and it's fun to be here with you, Nick, because I really enjoy the Millennial Roundtable and the times that you host, and so to get to do the show with you today is fun.
It is a treat for me. I think it's more of a punishment for you, so I don't know what you did wrong with Kirby. I don't know the bad side that you got on with leadership, but nevertheless, consider me grateful.
No, I'm happy because I've got kids your age, and it's just, so I think I kind of get you all a little bit. Kirby does too. But it's just fun. It gives me energy.
Oh, yeah. I
hope it gives our listeners lots of energy too. I want to mention, and I did begin this before the break, but we're going to discuss a little bit later with the program Euphoria, which is a new HBO show that was just released in June. And it's probably one of the worst there's ever been out there. Tim Winter from Parents Television Council, they watchdog these things. And he joined me last week about it, and we got so concerned, we said we want to give people an action item. So let me just describe a little bit. I'm reading this out of the New York Times, talking about Euphoria. They say the bar keeps going up in the arena of self-consciously provocative teenage drama. And they're talking about 13 Reasons Why, which actually glorifies suicide in a sense. Yeah. And they've actually had a little bit of a breakthrough with regard to that show. That's on Netflix. But HBO's new High School Will Kill You series, that's what the New York Times calls it, which debuted in June, is already both celebrated and condemned for pushing the envelope, says the New York Times. It offers drugs, despair, danger, lots of sex in rough, violent, inappropriate, illegal, and mortifying forms. And I might mention, as we discuss this, we will discuss it more at the top of the next hour. Parents might want to. We're going to try to actually avoid being too graphic about it. We're just going to talk about how graphic it is. but it is bad. So it's just going to be up to you as parents to discern what you want to do with your kids during that time. But the show has just got so many themes that are rough. Let's put it that way. So what we've done is we've made it our take action item right now, and HBO is owned by AT&T. AT&T's head Randall Stevenson, their CEO and president, actually lives here in Dallas. They are headquartered here, and he's supposedly a family man, a Boy Scout leader for a long time, and so this is a person that Tim Winter at Parents Television Council thinks that we might be able to get through to reason with. And that's what he tries to do with media leaders himself. And he was in media for most of his career. So he does that, but they need some backup with regard to citizens and people that care about it.
You know, when I was reading this article and hearing about the show, because granted, I'm not the most avid TV watcher.
Neither am I.
But I was just shocked because all the research that I've always assumed that TV shows somewhat parallel reality, that they don't too far drift away from reality. Now, granted, there's exceptions to be made with fantasy shows, etc., but they've kind of been somewhat closer to reality. With Euphoria, it seems to just be so graphic, and it's just so outlandishly separated from reality. When you look at some of the themes that are utilized in there relative. So we'll talk about the sexual themes, for example. Like it's almost the exact opposite that's happening in the U.S. right now, especially among millennials and Gen Z. There's a decrease in the sexual activity among millennials and Gen Z. When you compare millennials specifically to a boomer generation, there's lower levels of sexual activity for millennials than there was for boomers when they were at that particular age. And so that's just one thing that I just have so much a bit of a qualm with, because it seems like it's just now shock and awe trying to get people to talk about it and keep people like us from being able to watch it just because it's so outlandish.
Well, that was a question I actually asked Tim Winter last week, and the thing is that Hollywood is on a different plane, and this show is it kind of comes out of the life of the producer, Sam Levinson, Barry Levinson's son, and he was an addict. He's now in his 40s, but it comes from that. It comes from the addiction side of the culture that still exists, but is not, it's not pervasive. And so, you're exposing people. And how much do we need to know that reality? Yeah. That's the question. Yeah. And, to put it out there, because the other part of this, and you know this, Nick, is that parents never had that much control about what their kids watch, but it's even worse now with streaming. Kids can get apps. They can go anywhere and be, far away from home and do what they want. And so when you put this stuff out there, it's going to affect it's going to affect kids.
Yeah, I guess for me, it goes back to what's the rationale for this? Is it just to get individuals to talk about this and hopefully watch it? Is it obviously every form of art is trying to make a particular statement. What statement are they trying to convey here? Or it goes back to what we were talking on the break about 13 Reasons Why. Like, what are you trying to? There's just what's the purpose of it, right? And if we're all moving in such a way that I'm operating out of the assumption that everyone wants to make our society a better place, I don't know what role a Euphoria type of show puts into that. And this is not a partisan thing. This is a humanity type of thing. What are we doing? Right? It would be the inevitable question I would always ask whenever I see this just overt graphicness that just tries to almost just numb you at the senses. So,
well, I think that is the best question we could ask about this. And ladies and gentlemen, I will mention to you, if you want to learn more about it, we've posted an article from Fox. It was out of the about 15 articles I read about Euphoria, it was the least graphic, but it still is. And just mentioning what's in the show, you could read about it there, and we will have Tim Winter on at the top of the next hour, and you can go to the Take Action item, which is in the middle of the home page, or it's also on our show page at the right now it's at the very bottom, but it's somewhere on our show page. I don't know if you know, we have a show page for Point of View that helps you to understand who our guests are and all the articles that we refer to. And you can go in there and you can actually use our message or compose your own and send it to the head of AT&T. Get this show off your platform. It shouldn't be there, is basically the message, but you can tweak it and make it yours if you want to.
Yeah, I think we would do well if we had more of The Office and Parks and Rec. I mean, I can just go on. Seinfeld. I mean, let's bring back Seinfeld. I really liked Seinfeld. I'm an old soul, and so I liked Seinfeld. So,
well, there's room for creativity, I think, for new shows.
Oh yeah.
They just don't have to be like this.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and the website is pointofview.net. So if you want to go see more about that, that would be great. I also, I had something I wanted to read you. I'm kind of giving you the news today because this is from the Wall Street Journal, actually over the weekend. And some people like Gary Bauer also brought this up. But the title, it's the notable and quotable section in the Wall Street Journal, any of you that are daily readers, which I am, called Change. And this is from AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Chief of Change, by David Montgomery in the Washington Post on July 10th. And it says, in a Wednesday morning in late May, emissaries of two of the strongest political voices on climate change convened at a coffee shop a few blocks from the U.S. Capitol. And one of them was Sakha Chakrabarti, who is the chief of staff of AOC. And then there was someone else named Sam Ricketts. He's climate director for Washington Governor Jay Inslee. So guess what they were talking about? Governor Inslee's running for president, and his big issue is climate change. That's what he's all about. It's the most important issue facing the country. Didn't you know? Well, Chakrabarti had an unexpected disclosure. He said, the interesting thing about the Green New Deal is that it wasn't originally a climate thing at all. And his coffee partner there, Ricketts, agreed to this with an attentive poker face. Do you guys think of it as a climate thing? Chakrabarti continued, because we really think of it as how do you change the entire economy thing. And Nick, we've always said that the environmental agenda was about changing the economy. But when you look at the Green New Deal and you go down all the parts of it, especially getting rid of fossil fuel, airplanes, and things like that, you see that it is about the economy.
Yeah, it's a one for our listeners. It's a bill, but it's not an act. I mean, it's a resolution. It's just pretty much saying this is an agenda I want to have formalized. But what's been formalized is just a restructuring of the American economy. What's created the most prosperous country in the history of the world, that certain individuals like AOC and her chief of staff, which is almost functions as the chief of a movement they're trying to form right now, wants to restructure that. And I think that thankfully we live in a democratic republic that allows individuals like ourselves to be able to combat and to be able to offer up a response for why we think the central components of the U.S. system are pretty beneficial and good for us right now.
And we will continue that discussion right after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View radio talk show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
And also Nick Pitts, and we are trying to change the world here, Nick.
I feel good about this. I feel good about our efforts right now.
I think we can do it. President Trump gets a lot of attention, and he likes it that way, I think. But there was one columnist in the Washington Post who mentioned that he was being tuned out by the media with the Democrat debates, and the Democrats were starting to sort of show some of their schisms and their differences, and that was becoming the subject of a lot of media out there, and that was actually helping Trump in the polls. Meghan McArdle said this in the Washington Post. The media is starting to tune Trump out, and it's helping him in the polls. And I think she probably wrote this piece over the weekend. It was published Monday. But that changed so fast that I sent this to you so we could talk about this, and then everything changed. Because then President Trump, he just used his Twitter account the way he always does, and it sort of changed everything.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things, if you were following along with the media narrative, I guess the political cycle, news cycle, past week, you saw that Democrats were just kind of combating one with another. You had the establishment part of the Democratic Party, led by Nancy Pelosi, was trying to form a coherent message and trying to move forward on particular agenda items. And then you had what's now been affectionately referred to as the Squad, which was AOC and Representative Omar and Tlaib, et cetera, that were obviously pushing for their particular ends relative to whether it be I can't remember what some of the things that they were arguing about. And then there was the Netroots Nation, which is a far left organization gathering that was really starting to gin up some of this identity politics that has become just very difficult to be able to go back and forth with. And so they were beginning to implode because there was being fractures that were dividing one with another within the Democratic Party. And then on Sunday morning, just everything changed when President Trump, just assuming he was at one of his homes or he was somewhere, and just tweeted some problematic things, I would say. The first instances were problematic we talked about a little bit yesterday on the Millennial Roundtable, where President Trump was saying that he referenced, which is very ambiguous with the tweets, in that he didn't reference the Squad or anyone in the Squad, but he did say some things that were problematic. To say
go back.
It would be one thing to be able to go back to your home countries. And he's done this. I think he's refined the message over the past couple of days to, I think, is a real important point to be made and can be argued. There's nothing problematic about an individual that doesn't like our country. You telling them, well, if you don't like our country, then no one's forcing you to stay here. But I think it's another thing. I think it's a distinctive clause that he's making, or claim that he's making, when he says you can go back to your home country, especially if we're assuming that he's talking about the Squad. 3 or 4 of them are from here. And so I think that's the problematic claim, that's right. That's not right, or that's wrong, I should say. But now, over the past couple of days, he's refined that to be able to say, well, if you don't like it, you don't have to stay here, which I think is a separate claim than what he was making on Sunday.
Well, on Sunday, you have to complete the phrase, though, because he did say go back and fix things. And I think he's talking about their countries of origin, even if they're not from there.
Yeah.
And, for instance, AOC, isn't she Puerto Rican?
Yeah. So which is again,
kind of that country, has its issues. So he's saying, go back and fix it, and come back and show us how to fix it. Tell us how you fixed it. So, I think that's a valid point in a sense. And of course, everyone picks up on go back as being quote unquote racist. But I would take it beyond that, because later when he was explaining, and the days since then, he's talked about that they are un-American. Yeah. And that is, I disagree with that more, because you can disagree with the way things are done and be an American. That's the beautiful
part of America, right? Like that's why our founders enshrined the freedom of speech, because our founders knew that there are certain ideas that are going to create and cause tension. But I think it's always been true within the American experiment that disagreements actually make us better. When we have sharp disagreements and we have this debate, you've got Tocqueville that says that that's a key defining part of what makes America so great, is her ability to repair her own faults through common dialogue with one another. I mean, even in James Madison in the Federalist Papers, showing that ambition counteracts ambition. Different goals and different viewpoints counteract one with another to create a limited form of this government thing that we have within our system. And so I think disagreements have always been a very rich part and a unique part of the American experiment that I think we should celebrate and we should keep. I'm a little concerned when he tells them to go back when in reality they started here. So to tell them to go back is kind of an indictment on his own presidency when he says, go back to where your own problems are. Well, Mr. President, we're from here. And so I think that's more of a qualm there. But I just think that there's a richness to our disagreements. And I think
yes. So we mentioned change, and the Green New Deal is a transformative change. And so their ideas, I mean, in a sense, in my mind, their ideas are un-American because they refute what has made our country great and successful. They're completely anti-capitalist about anything, and they want the government basically to control everything. And of course, that would not make people's lives better. And we could talk about every item of the Green New Deal, which encompasses a lot more than you can even imagine.
You got to get rid of those cows. You got to get rid of those airplanes, etc. Those cows just have too much flatulence, apparently. So we've got to tamp that down.
So in a sense, I mean, the un-American, if you applied it to their ideas, you could have an argument there. It's just that, in some sense, Twitter is good to provoke discussion, but it's also such a short message that it can be misinterpreted.
So it's so funny. So I always, because again, I think one of the things that social media has done, I'll say it like this: there's always been times in the American experiment where there's just been outlier voices, but we haven't known about it. Social media has created a small town effect where we are intimately acquainted with everybody's opinion, or can be intimately acquainted, like we know. And so there's just not social media does not promote the idea of self-control. So there is I'm reminded of Abraham Lincoln had what he called almost like a rudimentary form of a burn book. He would write a letter out, and then he would put it and he said he would put all his negative emotion in this letter, and then he would put it in his drawer. And then he would bring it back out when his temperature had calmed, and he would write "never signed, never sent" on it, just because he knew that was a way for him to vent. You have John Adams, which was another individual. Well, John Adams, as we know, was he was a very volatile man, to say the very least. Well, what John Adams would do is John Adams just had this phrase that he often uttered of, if you can't control your mouth, you need to go sit back at the children's table. And what was for John Adams, that meant he always retreated back home. He was never in the Capitol at that time. But we're living in a day today where I don't have to write never signed, never sent, or go be quiet. I have a social media.
Or go home, because you can do just as much damage from home as you can from the Capitol.
So it's just it's an interesting new world that we're living in, and what we choose to pay attention to will be increasingly important. Hence the reason why I'm grateful for programs like Point of View to help us discern what's actually the right topics we need to be thinking about, because we're living in a world in which we're flooded with the opportunity to be able to think about everything, but not everything is worthy of our attention.
So even folks who are sort of on the conservative side have been critical of those particular tweets and calling them racist and all of that. And I contend they're not racist. But and it's interesting because now the Heritage Foundation, the Daily Signal, which is their publication, there's one piece there today: Trump's deplorable tweets overshadow how his policies benefit minorities. And that's very true, that the economy now has improved. There are more jobs available for all minorities who are suffering. And so everybody's doing better in a sense. And so and Trump, of course, says there's not a racist bone in my body. So we're in a time, as you said, we're in a weird time, because we as believers, we don't love everything about Donald Trump. We can't really get behind his whole life story and all of that. But yet, there's so much that's to our liking that's been happening.
Matt, he is probably one of the most transactional presidents. One of the most transactional presidents that we've had. He is there. The common delineation that's made is that there's a difference between the man and his administration. His administration has been one of the most friendly to evangelicals and just religious entities that I would argue that we've seen in quite a lifetime. But I do think that what we're seeing, though, is there's a lot of positives, but there are a couple of negatives that have come along with that. And how we deal with that is, I think, going to be important not only for political reliability, but also for our public witness.
If you want to weigh in, 800-351-1212. We'll be back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, we're glad you're with us here at Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. Nick Pitts is also with me, and most of you know that Nick Pitts is the host of our Tuesday shows almost every week, and he brings in a roundtable of people in his millennial generation.
Yeah.
And you all cover topics that are of interest to millennials, but I think what I appreciate, since I'm not a millennial, is that you help us understand the millennial generation. And we have a lot, my generation has a lot to learn from the following generations, because we're going to be very irrelevant very fast if we don't.
I would beg to differ, and so I think it's a mutual understanding, and it's very much vice versa for us. I think one of the important things with millennials that's just probably the primary filter that I think we try to bring to the table every Tuesday is the reality that we just see things through a relational lens. That more often than not, we are highly relational individuals, and so stories are viewed through relationships. Hence the reason why we can be told that we're getting triggered. We can be told that we're snowflakes, which are two common phrases that are thrown about. But I think we can all agree that when it comes to family members and friends, all of us are snowflakes to a certain degree. All of us can get triggered because we're willing to go to great lengths to protect those that we love. And whenever we view stories and concepts, we just typically tend to do so through a relational lens. And so I think that brings a level of nuance that at least hopefully can convey some type of empathy. Now, granted, it doesn't change, especially from my Christian character, 1, 2, in my conservative framework. It doesn't change my principles that I hold, but it does change how I express those principles, which I think is just increasingly important if we want to continue, not necessarily to own the libs. I'm not convinced that we need to own them. I want to persuade them. And so I think that's going to be increasingly important as we move forward. And as we know, as Christians, there's nothing new underneath the sun. And so it's important not only to be able to understand how to do that, but understand other generations that have fought these fights, that have seen these things that are just taking on a new manifestation in 2019. And then what can be gleaned from the past, because the past isn't the past, as William Faulkner said, it's not even past yet. How do we understand what are the best practices moving forward? And
I do want to persuade them, but sometimes we don't and aren't able to. And then I want to know what you think about this, but then I think we have to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have politics.
Oh,
Politics is a tool to be able to win your ideas, make your ideas the ones that reign in the country. And I think the way we practice our politics is important. We have to hold the line on certain issues, and sort of exhibit a toughness, which I do appreciate about President Trump on some things. He may say it in a very sort of New York real estate guy tone, but so we do. I mean, there's ways I think that we can learn from generations that want to major on compassion, and that is be compassionate. These are human beings that we are discussing
behind every
these
policy
issues
is a
with.
Person. Yeah.
But politics, our country and our system was set up so that we can fight battles, and we can win elections, and we can sue people and win in the court or lose. And so, we have to use those tools with knowledge, with being very shrewd, and sometimes exhibiting toughness, but also remembering we're dealing with human beings.
Yeah, I think I think a couple of things. Like one of the things that I'm keenly aware of is I never want to forsake my Christian character for the sake of winning a political battle. And sometimes I think that seems like you're just trying to be a little lamb, which I don't think is the case. I think there's a certain meekness that does not equate to weakness. There's a meekness that we must continue to exhibit. One of the phrases that I'm particularly persuaded by is an individual named Russell Moore. He's coined the term,
I know him.
Convictional kindness. Like, I want to be kind, but I also want to exhibit and have strong convictions that I'm kind toward. And so I never want to have to forsake grace when speaking truth, but I also recognize that truth can sometimes be a club, and then truth isn't palatable, nor is it good if it doesn't have grace. And so I think we can do both, and I don't want to have to forsake one for the sake of
grace
the other.
Grace and truth. All right, speaking of Russell Moore, grace and truth, Russell Moore, of course, is the head of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. I used to be a commissioner on the ERLC when I was a Southern Baptist. Okay. And it was just a wonderful experience, and I got to know Russell Moore there. He was not head of it then, but Prestonwood Baptist Church is one of the big churches in the Southern Baptist Convention, and they have done something with regard to the border here in Texas, which I think is worthy of commendation.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
And Kirby sent me the article. It's actually in the Huffington Post. But Prestonwood is supporting undocumented immigrants by going down to the border and bringing supplies and ministering there. they've sent, Mike Buster, who is the executive pastor there, said that the mission is called Jack Graham, the pastor, Operation Border Blessing. They want to bless people. So, and there are other churches doing the same thing, but this was just about Prestonwood. Of course, they were saying it's a dichotomy because Jack Graham, who I mentioned, who's the pastor, is also on Trump's committee, and he's an advisor to the president. So he's definitely a supporter of Trump, and they're saying that those two don't equate. Yeah. I think they equate.
Yeah, I think one of the things I appreciate about what Pastor Graham has done here and what Prestonwood is trying to do is they're living out 1 Peter 2 of to be able to honor the authorities that are put into place. I think one of the ways that you honor the authorities is to be able to serve them down at the border. As we've known through some of the stories that have come out down at the border, that it can be very difficult and dangerous to be a Border Patrol agent. There was instances earlier this year where you had individuals that were throwing glass bottles at some of these Border Patrol agents. And just like any other law enforcement official, they always leave their home not knowing if they're going to come back. Mm-hmm. Nobody invites police officers to parties. They always show up at the breakdowns in society. And what not better way to be able to show the love of Jesus than to go down there and to practice the presence of Jesus. God's greatest love that he showed and the greatest love we can give is our presence. And not only are they making the trek of 10 plus hours in a bus, but they're coming down with gifts to be able to bless not only the agents, but also their families as well, which I think is a beautiful, good thing that we should celebrate. Because there's one thing that this world needs, the Beatles sung about it, and that we can agree to it, is we just need a little bit more love. And that's one of the things that Jesus has given us an abundance of, and one of the things that we can give to others as well.
And you can go to the border, you can offer supplies, you can offer love, but you can still believe that people ought to come into our country legally.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's, the Huffington Post is, I think, in a sense wrong in saying you can't do both. But the church's support for the Border Patrol, I think, in my opinion, I agree with this, but it's in this article, reflects arguments that conservative evangelical leaders have often made about immigration. That while the Bible calls on individual Christians and churches to care for migrants, it's the divine responsibility of the government to keep citizens secure. And that, I think, is one of the issues of our day.
Mm-hmm. We're living in a world of false dichotomies, it seems like. We either have to have no walls or turn our back and build up the highest walls. And I think that's just a false dichotomy. You read the biblical narrative, it's very clear. We have a responsibility to not every refugee, we have a responsibility to refugees. But we also have a responsibility to the citizens that are put into this place. And so one of the things that we need to do is to be keenly aware of how do we, one, care for the refugees that are there? How do we care for the Rahabs? How do we care for the Ruths? Because those are biblical refugees. But also, how do we make sure that we protect our borders as well? Because we've been given a plot of land that we need to protect because there's citizens there.
Next up, we'll talk about what HBO is doing in this new show, Euphoria. We'll be back.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, today for Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and Nick Pitts is also in the studio with me. We're going to try not to do too much damage while Kirby Anderson is away. But Nick Pitts, if you don't know this, hosts our show every Tuesday, running what we call here at Point of View the Millennial Roundtable. And Nick is a PhD, and he is immersed in the issues of the day and also history, and brings such a great take to Point of View. And Nick, I'm so glad you're here with me. Are you enjoying? It's been about a year now.
I know. I can't believe it. I can't believe I thought that the Point of View audience was patient. I've been astounded by their patience and their graciousness to put up with this Tennessean that now finds himself in Texas, hopefully not going to suffer the same fate as Davy Crockett. But I am exceedingly grateful for the chance and to learn from the likes of you and Kirby Andersons of this world. Count me grateful.
Well, we're hoping that our listeners are learning a lot about the millennial generation who's going to be running the place in not too many years. But, Nick, I do want to bring our audience back to something we discussed last week with our next guest, Tim Winter. And, by the way, Tim Winter is president of the Parents Television Council. This organization has been around a while trying to influence what goes out on television. And they do great work there. And Tim Winter, of course, worked in media, NBC, helped start and create MSNBC. He worked for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. He's also an attorney graduating from Loyola Law School. But we've been talking about this particularly egregious show called Euphoria. And when Tim was with me last week, we thought we've got to help out with the efforts of Parents Television Council and give people a way to weigh in on this. So we have actually created an action item on our website, and we'll explain that a little bit later. But I want to bring now to the microphone Tim Winter. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Penna, good day to you and your listeners from Hollywood.
Well, we're glad that you are with us, and we want to kind of recap what Euphoria is all about. I put up an article so people can read it. It was the one from Fox News. But reading from what the New York Times wrote about it, they call it HBO's High School Will Kill You series. And that's kind of descriptive if you wanted just a few words to describe it. But they're, drugs, sex, despair, danger, rough, violent, inappropriate, illegal, and mortifying sex and despair and danger. All of that is what the New York Times says about it, and more, which I don't even want to say on the air. But just tell us how you got involved with Euphoria and what you are trying to do about it.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the descriptions by the New York Times forgot to mention that this is a show that's targeted and marketed to teenagers and preteens. So when you take all the terrible content you're talking about and recognize that this show is being held out there as something that the teens will want to watch so that they can see how other teens behave, and to normalize this kind of extreme behavior, it's especially troubling. But taking us back just one step, the Parents Television Council is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Our mission is to protect children from the graphic sex, violence, and profanity that is so pervasive in our entertainment media today. Our vision is for a safe and sound entertainment environment for children and families. And we know that doesn't mean everything has to be squeaky clean for a 5-year-old. But what it does mean is that when there's content that's age inappropriate, that it's rated properly, it's in a place where kids don't have easy access to it, parents are aware, and that the corporations that produce and distribute the content are doing so responsibly. And what you have now with HBO, and you think of HBO as well, it's a premium cable subscription. Remember that HBO is now trying desperately to get onto your cell phone, onto your computer tablet with an app. And what that does is it allows children access to adult explicit content that is outside the purview of a parent's control. The show that's being marketed to kids, we've even seen social media posts where HBO is helping underage children to learn how to access this program on their cell phones. This really is a very troubling development as more and more children are getting their entertainment, not just through television, but through 21st century digital platforms.
Tim, as we discussed last week, HBO is owned by AT&T. So this is a corporation that, is expansive. And we think, and I think that you and I agree, that it's irresponsible for them to have something this on their platform that's marketed to children. And so that's kind of where you're directing your efforts right now, isn't it?
That's correct. When you follow what is the authority over this kind of a program, HBO is owned by Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was recently acquired by AT&T. The chief executive officer of AT&T is Mr. Randall Stevenson. He's based in Texas. We've heard really positive things about Mr. Stevenson personally. He's purported to be a man of good, strong family values. He, I think, led the National Boy Scouts for some period of time. This is a man who, by all accounts, is someone who should be taking steps to protect children from this type of content. And instead, his corporation, the corporation he leads, is allowing this show to be produced, distributed, and marketed to children.
So at Point of View, what we have done is we have made this our take action item. So if you go to pointofview.net and scroll down just a little bit, you'll see it. Take action and then email AT&T about HBO's series Euphoria, and you just click on it where it says take action. You fill in your name and a little bit of information so that we know that it's an actual person, a listener. And then there is a message to Randall Stevenson, and that will be sent to him, or you can edit it or write your own message about Euphoria. And so that way, I know that you have something going, Tim, with regard to your organization to communicate with him, or probably various ways. But we want to just help with that. So we're asking our listeners to take action.
We're so grateful for bringing voice to this important cause. Penna, we're so grateful to you and to Point of View for doing this. On the Parents Television Council's website, which is parentstv.org, parentstv.org, when you load the page, right away up will come a graphic about Euphoria. If you click on that graphic, it takes you immediately to a petition. It's something we are always conflicted with trying to explain to the public just how shocking this content is without also offending them. And what we've done is
it's a hard needle to thread sometimes.
It sure is. But what we've done is we've posted the petition to Mr. Stevenson, and there's also a link there where if you want to see the type of content we're talking about, you can click and see and take a look for yourself to see just how explicit it is. But it is the type of content that one would expect to be in a hardcore pornographic film. Add to it the fact that this last episode from this last Sunday night featured the teenage girl, the teenage character, the lead character, who, by the way, is a Disney star and a Disney Channel star. She's taking her audience with her to this new explicit show. But in the theme of this show,
let me jump in, Tim, because we're just about on a break. I don't want to cut this part of it short. Nick and I have a lot of questions for you, and we will be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, many members of the millennial generation think they're special. At least that is the conclusion of a recent study of college students. One newspaper report on the study put it this way: if you ask a college freshman today who the greatest generation is, they might respond by pointing in a mirror. The study of college students documented young people's unprecedented level of self-infatuation. Psychologist Gene Twenge found that over the last 4 decades of research on college freshmen, there has been a dramatic rise in self-confidence. For example, they describe themselves as above average in academic ability and in their personal lives. The problem is that there is a stark disconnect between their opinions of themselves and their actual ability. She's found that students suffer from what she calls ambition inflation. As their ambition increases, it reaches levels of unrealistic expectations. She has also found in another study that there has been a 30% increase towards narcissism in students since 1979. The changing culture is part of the reason for this dramatic change. She explains our culture used to encourage modesty and humility and not bragging about yourself. If someone did that in the past, we call that person stuck up or conceited. Today, the culture often rewards such attitudes and behavior. I would also argue that social media encourages and accentuates this trend. Students posting pictures of themselves on Facebook and Instagram, uploading videos on YouTube, and leaving numerous comments on Twitter receive positive feedback for such behavior. These technologies provide additional vehicles to feed their narcissism. These studies remind us that this generation needs guidance from pastors and parents so that they can apply biblical principles of success, humility, and self-image. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and Tim Winter is with me from the Parents Television Council. And Tim was describing before the break the Sunday night, edition of Euphoria and what happened there. Tim, I can't hear you right now. I don't know if we've got something going on, but if you can hear me, please answer that.
I sure can. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sunday night.
Yeah, Sunday night. This last Sunday's episode features the star of the show, the young woman who's the star of the show. Her name is Zendaya. That's her real name, or her acting name. She was a teen star for Disney, and she's now taking her young girl audience with her to this very explicit show. The entire premise introduction of this episode was how much she loves using illegal opioids and how wonderful they make her feel, and how the only thing that comes close is this other young woman she has sexual relations with. And if the premise of the show is talking about how wonderful opioid abuse is, and it's a teen-targeted show with a teen star who has a following who's been watching her for years on Disney Channel, we really are very disturbed about the impact that this can have, especially on our youngest viewers that have followed her during her career. She's built her career on the backs of parents and families and these children, and now she's doing this. I understand her desire to move away from Disney as a career path in terms of the character she's playing. But we really are concerned that a company would greenlight underwrite, produce, and now distribute this knowingly to children when it is so sexually explicit, so graphically violent, so profane? I think it was 44 F words just in this one episode last Sunday, and it's featuring an adoration of opioid abuse.
Tim, this is Nick. What do you think is the rationale behind this show? I think one of the things that I've continued to go back in my mind is now, granted, outside of fantasy, there's always been a sense of TV's kind of reflecting reality to a large degree, exaggerative to a certain, not significantly, but to a large degree, it's just reflecting reality. But when we see the numbers, like, so you talk about the sexual elements on the show, the numbers are very clear relative to Gen Z, relative to even kind of the older or younger millennials, rather. There's less sexual activity when compared to boomers that are at the same age. Is this just a cultural statement that they're trying to make? What do you think is the rationale behind this show?
Nick, it's a great question, and I could probably answer that question over the course of 4 to 6 hours, which I know is not my allotted time.
Well, I'm listening.
Today.
I hope our audience is ready.
Yeah. The answer is that there are folks in Hollywood who want to take extreme behavior and normalize it. That they want to take their experience and try to make it, even as extreme as it is, and try to make it sound mainstream and to make it more normalized. When this show was created, they said, well, we want to start a dialogue between parents and children so that parents understand what kids are dealing with today. But they also said that this is not intended for children. And then they said, well, we're actually going to try to freak out parents. Why would they be freaking out parents if this is not intended for children? They have had 4 or 5 different proclamations about what the intention is for this show. But one thing they also talked about was wanting to basically shock the audience. They said they want to make this show, make 13 Reasons Why on Netflix, look like an after-school special. The 13 Reasons Why, I've been on the show here with Penna before talking about this pro-suicide show, teen suicide show. And why would you ever create a show that is now linked to the increase in teen suicides in America and say we're going to try to make that look like an after-school special? That is Hollywood's lemming-like behavior where they see something that has some attention, some attraction, and they try to outdo it. It's very copycat-oriented here in Hollywood. And I think that what the creators of this show is, they wanted to just shock viewers even more. They wanted to target teens, and they saw the success commercially of 13 Reasons Why, and they wanted to out-shock the audience, even as shocked as they were with 13 Reasons Why. And by the way, there was just an announcement the day before yesterday that Netflix has decided to remove from 13 Reasons Why the graphic suicide scene because of the scientific link now to an increase in teen suicide in America. So that's a positive development, and we would urge AT&T also to be responsible, to not promote this to children, to take this off its platform. They either this reflects their corporate values or it does not. There is no in between.
It just is shocking. Is this even good? Are there critics that are coming behind this and saying, "Well, it's good quality. At least it's shot very well. The cinematography." Is there individuals that are coming and trying to redeem or point out any positive aspects to this, or is this simply just kind of a filler in this entertainment-driven world that we live in?
Yeah, I'm using air quotes here in my office. My fingers are doing air quotes. There are journalists, air quotes, and commentators who will always applaud something, and there are some people who are doing that. I will tell you that even the most mainstream media outlets that cover the entertainment industry were shocked and upset by this one. Hollywood Reporter was the first to reach out to us, and that's the industry paper for Hollywood, came to us and said, "Wow, we're really concerned about this one." So this really is something that it is shock for the sake of shock value, and again the attempt to normalize extreme, harmful, disgusting behavior is even taking some in Hollywood by surprise.
Do you think this is the first of more to come? Do you think we've reached a pinnacle? What's your you've been in this space for so long. Is this just kind of the first of many that's to come in this kind of genre, or do you think this is a tipping point where there's just been so much backlash that you would expect the pendulum to swing back?
I've been at this with the Parents Television Counselor for 16 and a half years, and I referred to it as a race to the bottom, seemingly without a bottom.
Oh, wow.
What I do know is that if voices can be channeled and directed at the corporations that allow this to be distributed, and if they step back and say we can't allow this under our banner to happen, and if they change it, it's a shot across the bow to Hollywood to say thus far and no farther. Mm-hmm. And we believe even with 13 Reasons Why, the shock there, the fact that they have now taken out the most graphic scene of suicide we've ever seen produced for any form of media. They're taking it out. They've removed it. That's a good step forward. We're hoping that is a shot across Hollywood's bow, never to do that again. So we have to make sure that we're setting boundaries wherever we can. And if we can help AT&T set a boundary here and say, this is not consistent with our corporate brand, our corporate values, then it's going to be tougher for someone in Hollywood to try to say, hey, let's do this even worse next time.
It's good, Tim, to be able to report this action, I think, by Netflix. And I am so grateful that Point of View has the opportunity to just do our part, since we've got folks listening that I think are probably shocked by the descriptions of Euphoria. And also, we got some action-oriented folks here on Point of View. So let me point you to the Point of View website, the homepage, and scroll down to Take Action. Click on Take Action, and that's where it's very, very simple. We make it simple. You can just put in your contact info, and then there's an email you can send to Randall Stevenson, who heads up AT&T, the parent company of HBO, to really encourage him to get this off the air in strong words. You can change the wording if you want or write your own email, but this is an opportunity for you to weigh in on this. We make it easy. And Tim Winter, you alerted us to this. We are so grateful to Parents Television Council for the work that you're doing out there.
Thank you, Penna. It's something that I think most Americans agree that we need to let children be children. We need to encourage parents to be better parents, and we need to hold those accountable who are trying to undermine the well-being of our kids through the entertainment media that is corrupting them. We have to join our voices together. Otherwise, this will only get worse. Our voices, every voice, truly matters.
And by the way, would you give out your website so that people can find out more about the show if they want to?
Yeah, Parents TV, parents plural, parentstv.org, parentstv.org. You can learn about what's out there. You can be given some good recommendations about family-friendly, safe entertainment. You can channel your voice and be an activist, or you can just learn and be a more informed parent, grandparent, family member. That's why we're here. We're here to protect children, and protecting children truly saves lives.
Tim Winter of Parents Television Council, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Penna. Thank you very much for your voice.
Ladies and gentlemen, pointofview.net is where you can go. You can also find out more about Euphoria there, and you can make a difference by taking action. Pointofview.net. We've got so much more today, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
So you sit down and do your budget, and you look at all your monthly costs and your bills and your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. That is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. And when it comes to healthcare sharing ministries, MediShare is really the gold standard. It's been around for 25 years and has more than 400,000 members. It's been around so long and grown so much because it works. And whether you're single or married or have kids, this could make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. $500 a month can more than cover a car payment or pay back loans, whatever. So join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Here's the number to call. They are incredibly kind and helpful to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team. pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And Dr. Nick Pitts in studio also. And we've got a guest, Nick. And, you know, it's before I bring him in, I just want to mention that we all appreciate our pastors because, and I don't think we realize sometimes how hard it is to be a pastor. It's a challenging job. It's you live a life of self-sacrifice in a sense.
Oh my goodness, I get it's one of the unique vocations that really doesn't it's very hard to establish boundaries when you're a pastor, because you are quite literally you're been entrusted with a particular flock by the Lord, and then in turn that flock is just like any sheep. It's just you need your pastor, especially if you believe it to be true that the pastor is the one that's come to guide you and lead you into the fullness of life that Jesus has died to give you. And so it's a very vigorous job, but also a very rewarding job as well.
The National Association of Evangelicals recognizes this, and they actually have launched a national campaign to help congregations to show and share God's love for their pastors in creative and practical ways. And the spokesperson for this is Brian Kluth, who is our guest now on Point of View. And Brian, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, Penna and Nick, great to be with you and your listeners. And thank you for the privilege of talking about the whole idea of bless your pastor. It's an exciting topic. And for everyone listening right now, I believe there's something they could do to be a blessing to their pastor.
A lot of times we think about our pastor blessing us. I mean, every Sunday you hear a sermon and they're in the pulpit and, you know, you're getting blessed. And I think sometimes we think our pastors are hyper spiritual or invincible, and we forget that they're human beings and they actually could benefit from some, special attention from us.
You bet. Yeah, there really is this huge need. What most Christians are not aware of in America right now is the majority of pastors serve in smaller churches. 80% have under 200, 50% have under 100. The budgets are small in those churches, and because of that, pastors are not able to be cared for well or paid well. But the average person doesn't know that. But 90% of pastors, according to our research, say they are facing real financial pressures. 50% make less than $50,000 a year, even though they work 50 to 60 hours a week or more. And 60% receive no retirement, no health care, no employee benefits. And so that pastor and his family really sacrifice for their congregation, and most people aren't even aware.
By the way, let's open up the phones, Nick. The number's 800-351-1212. If folks want to talk about ways that they can think of that you could bless a pastor, or even if you are a pastor and perhaps have experienced a certain touch from somebody in the congregation, give us a call, 800-351-1212. What are your prescriptions for folks? What can we do to bless our pastors?
Well, the prescription is I based on my 10 years of being a pastor, and I took a $70,000 pay cut to become a pastor in my mid-40s with a family of 3 young kids. And what I discovered is my church loved me really well. So they couldn't pay me a lot, but what happened was there were people that gave us child care. There was doctors that gave us low cost or no cost medical care. There were mechanics that fixed our cars. There were people that shared their vacation home with us. So a few times when we needed to travel, people gave us frequent flyer points. Then when my wife had cancer, there were people that took her to the chemo treatments, and people gave us gift cards so that she didn't have to worry about shopping and preparing a meal and cleaning up and all of that. So I wrote a little flyer called 50 Creative Ways to Show and Share God's Love for Your Pastor and Church Staff. And at the blessyourpastor.org website, we have that available free for anybody in any church. And then a training video, a 7-minute training video for church boards, because the pastor can't ask for this. This has to be done by the board and by the people in the congregation. Can never come from a request from the pastor. The pastor would never admit he has a need. So it's really about Christians stepping up and showing God's love to the pastor.
That's phenomenal. I also, Brian, served on a church staff. I was never a lead pastor, but one of the things that I'm keenly aware now is just, you always hear about burnout that's happening among the pastorate, but it's a very real thing because a pastor is unlike any other vocation. There's a spiritual component to it. I mean, we even see it iterated in the scriptures that he who teaches the scriptures will be judged twice. There's a significant level of judgment that's unlike any other profession. And so I think there's a richness there that we need to be keenly aware of, but also with that is an opportunity to be able just to be a kind and refreshing word to your pastor, because as we know, more often than not, the pastor knows what the problems are, but don't always know kind of the goodness that's happening.
Yeah, for sure. Scripture also says that we're to show, 1 Thessalonians 5:12, we're to show deep appreciation for those who minister among us. And Galatians 6:6 says that those who are taught the Word of God should share all good things with the one who teaches them. And so there's this call of God on the life of every Christian listening to us right now to say, who are you? What do you have? What are you good at? What are you skilled at? What possessions could you share? What could you do personally to be a blessing to your pastor? I was talking to a minister the other day, and he said, Brian, if someone just even came and said they would watch my kids, he said, last year my wife and I only went out on 2 dates, and we had $75. We went to Starbucks because $60 went for the child care and $15 for Starbucks, and we only did it twice in an entire year. He said, even if that happened, you have no idea. Other pastors have said people have opened up their vacation homes to them. And they said if it wasn't for that family that opened up the vacation home, we would have never had a family vacation. Those kinds of really practical, tangible, creative things just, oh my goodness, it just lifts the pastor's spirit and his family and church staff. I mean, just this blessing can flow to anybody in Christian service, and you can show God's love to people.
Brian, where did this? I'd be interested to know, how did this start? Where was it? What was the genesis of this initiative?
Well, the genesis came from Lilly Endowment. They're out of Indianapolis. They've sensed a huge need in this whole world of pastor compensation for a number of years, and they've actually given our organization $1 million to help improve the financial health of pastors across America. And we have training things online, but then the big part of it is the Bless Your Pastor, encouraging churches and Christians to really step up and be more intentional about how they care for their pastor, because the pastors truly need the care, but they're not in a position to be able to ask for it.
We are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. Harold is calling in from Georgia. Harold, thanks for calling. You're on Point of View. Actually, I've just lost him for a minute. We'll get him in a minute. But I do want to ask a question, because you say 90% of pastors feel financial pressure, 50% make less than $50,000 a year. This one really disturbs me, though. Nearly 60% of pastors do not receive retirement or health care benefits.
Correct.
It seems like, I know that churches are small, but that seems like a real glaring omission. Something that should be addressed.
Yeah, and it certainly should be. And in our Bless Your Pastor toolkit for church boards, we really address not only the creative ways to bless your pastor, but also really look at compensation issues, benefits, and those kinds of things. So we have tools to give them, because a lot of times a church board is small. Some of their leaders are not experienced in business or in HR or those kinds of things, and they don't always know where to turn. So we provided a lot of valuable resources. But one of the big challenges is 50% of churches in America, their budgets are $125,000 or less. So in that $125,000 or less, you're trying to pay the pastor, take care of the building, give the missions, run your programs, and so the money just doesn't go very far. And so things get left out, like health care, like retirement, like even employee reimbursement. The pastor goes out to lunch with somebody. If that person doesn't pick up the tab, the pastor picks it up, but he doesn't get reimbursed for that many times. He pays for that out of his own pocket. So, this is a real need in America. It's a kind of a silent subject and a hidden subject, but that's why we're bringing it to light with the Bless Your Pastor movement.
Do you have a website where people can find the suggestions that you said you've written a pamphlet?
Yeah. So blessyourpastor.org. They just go there, and there's a little pamphlet, 50 creative ways to show and share God's love of your pastor. There's a 7-minute video for church boards so they can know how to implement this. We've made everything cookie cutter, easy to use, and when churches do this, we're going to actually give their pastor a $150 gift card with some of the grant money we got. So every church that does this will add to the blessing and bless their pastor with $150 Amazon gift card. But we just want to, the Bible says we're to spur one another on to love and good deeds, and that's what this movement's all about, spurring people on.
You can also go to pointofview.net, and you can see Brian's picture. Click through to their website. We will have more with Brian Kluth after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I want to preview the next hour because we're going to be joined by an attorney, David Cortman from Alliance Defending Freedom, to talk about a case that the Supreme Court has accepted that could bring major changes in school choice laws, and also the fact that the president of Planned Parenthood, she's only been there 8 months, Leanna Wen, she was actually fired. She'll be stepping down, and we will talk about why that's happening in the next hour. But Brian Kluth is with us, and he is with the National Association of Evangelicals. They've announced their Bless Your Pastor campaign. You had a press conference, didn't you, Brian?
Yeah, we had one today, and we're just excited to be able to share this whole idea of Bless Your Pastor and the movement and the materials that Christians and churches can use to really care for their pastors well.
So is this something that is going to be concentrated in a certain time period? Is it something that's ongoing, a campaign of National Association for Evangelicals? How's it working?
Yeah, we will be all summer long. We'll be talking about this in media, so that Christians and church leaders can go to the blessyourpastor.org website, get the free materials, and a lot of people will tie this into their October Pastor Appreciation Month. Focus on the Family. He's promoted that for many years. That's a great way to focus this effort. But in our materials, we tell churches they can do it any time of the year. They can do it in October. In my church, they always did an annual Christmas offering for the pastor and the staff. And every year, my family and our church staff were given anywhere from probably $600 to $1,400 as a Christmas gift from our congregation. And that made a huge difference for all of our families. It allowed us to travel and see relatives or buy the Christmas presents. But it can be done any time of the year. So the Bless Your Pastor, each church can decide when to do it. But the materials we'll be talking about all summer, so people can get access to the materials at the blessyourpastor.org website.
So you, at your church, you're the pastor, so you're not going to be promoting this. So just give us some practical ways that folks who either they kind of have a good role at their church, but they're not the pastor. Yeah. How can they get people to bless their own pastor?
Well, I'm actually not a pastor at this point, so I'm leading this effort full time.
Okay.
So this is my full-time effort, but I was a pastor for 10 years. But what you are really, Penna, on what you just said, the pastor can't ask for this.
Yeah.
It'd be like saying to everybody, "Hey, my birthday's coming up. Here's my list of what my wants." A pastor can't do that. So that's why it's so important for everybody listening to us right now to go get the free materials and then let your church board members know about it. Text them, tell them, email them, hey, let's have our church do the Bless Your Pastor effort. And so it's really a grassroots kind of a thing, and then lay leaders in the church have to do this, but they have to do it kind of behind the scenes. I mean, the pastor can know about it, but the lay leaders work with the office staff, communication staff, and they send out an email about this, or they put something in the mail about this. They take up the offering, they give the gift. So it's really kind of a quiet, behind the scenes, but the impact of it is life-changing and life-giving when Christians really catch a vision on blessing their pastor. And we extend it to the church staff. We say pastor and church staff.
So in some churches, you mentioned that so many churches were very small. There are a lot of pastors out there who are actually bivocational. They could not survive on the salary that they're getting from the church.
Yeah, many are bivocational, and the other thing is 66% have their spouses working. So if it wasn't for a spouse working or additional income, they could not even serve their church. Yeah. So I was
for that, in that case, certain gifts are going to be more appropriate for people who are just living on the poverty line, basically, and being ministering to folks. What I mean, from your list, what's appropriate for that?
Well, literally just getting them a grocery gift card. Say, hey, pastor, here's a $100 grocery gift card. Or maybe some people listening to us have some gift cards to different places they've never used, or they've been sitting on them. Lowe's, Home Depot, Denny's, a restaurant gift card. Just say, hey, pastor, I had this, don't really need it, want to pass it along to you.
Great idea.
My pastor loves Chipotle, and if I would give him a $50 gift card from Chipotle, he would have thought he would die and went to heaven. So it's just that.
Well, you have to use it. You have to. You might be reticent to go out to dinner because you're on a very tight budget. But if somebody gives you a gift card, you've got to go out to dinner.
That's absolutely right. And my church did that when my wife had cancer. And we literally had a stack of gift cards. And so my wife didn't have to worry about shopping and preparing and cooking. She would have her chemotherapy. She would be weak. And we were able to go to restaurants. And that continued for 8 years. We literally had cards to be able to go out and eat for years just because my people wanted to care for my wife and our family during a difficult time.
Well, thank you for that testimony. Brian, we appreciate your alerting us to this and being one of the organizations that you thought was important to get the word out about this campaign. We hope and pray that it's very, very successful and certainly needed, and certainly just something that the Lord, I know, would have all of us participate in. We can actually all do it.
Yes,
if we look at your list, I think we could all find
a
way to do it.
Exactly. And Penna and Nick, we do appreciate the work you're doing, and so grateful for your listeners, and that we can get the word out, and they can go to the blessyourpastor.org website, get the free materials, and then just do it.
Okay. Well, great, Brian.
That's the fun part.
I want to add my amen to it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Perhaps you can come back in some time, after some time has passed, and report on it.
Hey, I would love to do that. So, hey, thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you. That is Brian Kluth. He is with the National Association of Evangelicals, the Bless Your Pastor campaign. And we are encouraging folks, you can actually go to pointofview.net and click through on his picture and get to their website and find out ways that you can participate. Also, I want to encourage you to go to our Take Action item. We did in the first half hour cover this awful HBO program that's been introduced in June, Euphoria, and it should not be on the air. And AT&T, who owns the company HBO that is airing this, should be told that it's just not a program that should be out there. And we are doing that. We have a Take Action item. It's on the homepage, or it's also on the show page for today. It enables you to take action and send an email. The email is already written, or you can edit or write one yourself. It will go to Randall Stevenson, head of AT&T, and tell him that Euphoria should be taken off the air. So we're asking for that specific action. We're pretty good about doing that here at Point of View, making it easy for you to weigh in on some of these important issues. So go there. Also, by the way, the donate button is at also on our homepage. It's up in the right-hand corner. Point of View, as you'll hear from Bob Allen in the break, is a listener-supported program. We depend on the gifts of our listeners. We ask that you always keep us in mind in your giving, and you can do that very easily by going to pointofview.net. Next up, we are going to bring to the microphone an attorney from Alliance Defending Freedom to discuss a Supreme Court case that, you may have heard of something called the Blaine Amendments. And what they really do is they bar money from going to private schools through school choice programs if they are religious. They're in various states, and they come from a great deal of religious bigotry back in the early 1900s and are still in our laws. They need to be struck down. The state of Montana has brought a challenge, and it's going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We're going to talk about that. And also the president of Planned Parenthood stepping down. She was actually fired. Why?
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
We're so glad you're with us for this final hour of Point of View. Dr. Nick Pitts is also with me in studio and co-hosting, and he runs our Millennial Roundtable on Tuesdays, and also does a lot of hosting here at Point of View. You're going to be doing quite a bit while Kirby is gone in the next week or so.
I know. So listeners, get ready, because you're going to have to endure the millennial that has been gratefully added to the rotation here at Point of View. Excited to be with you all a little bit more over the next week, and exceedingly grateful that Penna Dexter is willing to put up with me today.
It's been fun so far. We'll see what the next hour brings, Nick.
Tongue in cheek, that's what she's saying.
But I found an editorial the other day in the Wall Street Journal, Church School in the High Court, and it reads, fresh off upholding the Bladensburg Cross, the Supreme Court has taken another case with even more at stake for religious liberty. The justices agreed to hear a challenge that involves Montana's Blaine Amendment, a constitutional provision that bars tax credit scholarships from going to religious schools. And with us to discuss this is David Cortman from Alliance Defending Freedom, really the powerhouse religious liberty law firm. Mr. Cortman joined ADF in 2005. He now supervises a team of nearly 40 attorneys and legal staff. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, great to be on.
Tell us about this particular case. It's a long time coming, isn't it?
It is, and it's a really important case. You know, people always hear in the news about school choice and how important that is, and this is just another step in that. The state of Montana legislature enacted a tax credit, and people are familiar with those. You donate to some cause, and then you get to write it off the bottom line of your taxes. So they had a tax credit that basically a modest sum, $150, can be given to a nonprofit organization who then could give that to students who are struggling income-wise to private schools, both religious and secular. The Department of Revenue of the state turned around and said, no, it violates their state establishment clause, the separation of church and state, to include religious schools in this program along with everybody else, and struck that down, and there was a challenge brought through the court system.
Why is the time right for this?
Well, it's important because we hear so much about the Establishment Clause, the separation of church and state. How do we treat religious people and religious organizations? The Bladensburg Cross you mentioned, is it unconstitutional because there's a war memorial that's in the shape of a cross? And so it's just another question in the correct interpretation of the Constitution, and where do religious organizations and religious people and religious monuments fit and otherwise in the culture?
So for our listeners, David, what would be some talking points that you would give to them? So I'm thinking about this idea for our listeners, like the idea of separation between church and state. What would you say to them when they hear talking points like that? Or maybe even a more first principle question: what good does religion do in our community? Why should we be interested in something like this?
Yeah, and I'll answer the second question first, just because a couple things jump to mind. Mm-hmm. You know, what good does religion do? The great thing about our country, unlike many other countries in the world, is we have true religious freedom. We have true free speech here. And if you don't have true religious freedom, then all of the other freedoms fall. So we call it here at ADF our first freedom. And the reason for that is if you have a country that does not honor true religious freedom, you have no freedom of the speech, you have no freedom of press, you have no freedom of association, all those types of things. So the other good thing about true religious freedom is you don't need to be religious to enjoy it. And what I mean by that is if you have the right to free exercise like we do in our Constitution, it's the right to believe and profess and the right not to. So the corollary of freedom to everyone is whether you're a person of faith or not, this freedom protects everyone.
David, ADF had a case 2 years ago, the Trinity Lutheran versus Comer, that you won. That's very relevant to this case, isn't it?
It is. It's very relevant, and the reason for that is that was a similar issue of what do we do in these programs that are neutral, they apply across the board, but yet we exclude a religious organization simply because it's religious. And in Trinity Lutheran, I'm pretty familiar with that case because I got to work on it and argue it at the Supreme Court, so that was pretty cool. But what's interesting about it is there was a program where they recycle tires. So great for the environment. You know, they get all the tires from the rivers and the landfills and all different places, and they recycle them. And then the government says, we're going to use these to soften playgrounds. So if you ever notice, they have these rubber surfaces that go on playgrounds for kids to be more safe. And they have this program that says, okay, we're going to give you a reimbursement grant. In other words, you got to pay for it, but we'll give you a reimbursement grant if you are not-for-profit and you operate a school and you fill out this long application that the government has you do, and you rank high. So we have a client who runs a preschool, and they happen to be operated by a church. They fill out the application. They get ranked really high, number 5, awarded the grant. Then the government finds out that, well, hey, wait a minute, this otherwise qualifying school is operated by a church, and then disqualify them solely because they are operated by a church. We litigated that case, went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't treat religious organization or religious people worse than everybody else. This was a neutral program. It's odious to the Constitution, the court said, to exclude religious organizations from this otherwise available program.
Well, but a playground is not necessarily religious, but in this case, when these schools will be, these government monies will be going to Christian schools, it will be to teach all subjects, including religion. So that's going to make that is a difference, isn't it?
It is, but a minor one. And the reason is what the court has said is where does the money come from and whose money is it? Mm-hmm. So in this case, it's actually a little bit easier because this is private money. So one of the arguments that folks on the left sometimes make is when you go to work, all of your money, all of your pay is actually the government's except for the little bit they let you keep. Our argument, no, it's all the money is yours until they pull your taxes from you, get it into the Treasury, then it becomes theirs. Whether you agree or disagree is not the point. Well, they're making in these arguments that when you have this tax credit, it's automatically the government's money, and that's a big principle for those who don't want the government involved in every dime they make and everything they spend. So on that interest, this is private money, even though the lower court said no, this is from the public treasury. So that's a pretty big issue.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, David, I appreciate. I mean, this is pretty exciting because, and I know we only have you for just a minute, so we can't really get back to the history of this, which is something we've got to unpack, I think, on another day, Nick. But this could be huge because it could actually wipe out these state Blaine amendments. Correct?
Well, it can, and what's interesting, the Trinity Lutheran case was the first step in basically saying, so these Blaine amendments say that you can't give any money, any public funds, directly or indirectly, to any religious organization, and the quick history of it, these were anti-Catholic measures back in the 1870s when there was denominational fights and things going on, and they've survived in a lot of the states, and the Supreme Court said in Trinity, these cannot be used to be hostile to religion. So this is another extension, another dagger, if you will, in the heart of the Blaine Amendments to say, no, this treating religious organizations worse than everybody else is not consistent with the federal Constitution, and these amendments can't stand.
Well, your work then in the Trinity case is key and very important. So we appreciate your work and all the work of ADF. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, thanks for having me on.
We'll be right back after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, many members of the millennial generation think they are special. At least that is the conclusion of a recent study of college students. One newspaper report on the study put it this way: if you ask a college freshman today who the greatest generation is, they might respond by pointing in a mirror. The study of college students documented young people's unprecedented level of self-infatuation. Psychologist Gene Twenge found that over the last 4 decades of research on college freshmen, there has been a dramatic rise in self-confidence. For example, they describe themselves as above average in academic ability and in their personal lives. The problem is that there is a stark disconnect between their opinions of themselves and their actual ability. She's found that students suffer from what she calls ambition inflation. As their ambition increases, it reaches levels of unrealistic expectations. She has also found in another study that there has been a 30% increase towards narcissism in students since 1979. The changing culture is part of the reason for this dramatic change. She explains our culture used to encourage modesty and humility and not bragging about yourself. If someone did that in the past, we called that person stuck up or conceited. Today, the culture often rewards such attitudes and behavior. I would also argue that social media encourages and accentuates this trend. Students posting pictures of themselves on Facebook and Instagram, uploading videos on YouTube, and leaving numerous comments on Twitter receive positive feedback for such behavior. These technologies provide additional vehicles to feed their narcissism. These studies remind us that this generation needs guidance from pastors and parents so that they can apply biblical principles of success, humility, and self-image. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and Dr. Nick Pitts is also in studio. We're co-hosting today. The rest of the show is going to be pretty much of an open line, so let's open the phones. Nick, 800-351-1212. People can weigh in on what we've talked about or what we're going to talk about. And just now we had, as our guest, David Cortman from Alliance Defending Freedom. And he actually argued a case at the Supreme Court. And we talked about this back in I think it was a couple of years ago. It was the Trinity case, Trinity Lutheran School. It had to do with tires for playgrounds. And could they be, it was sort of a benefit, I guess, coming from a charitable organization. Could it also go to religious schools as well as public or secular private schools? And religious schools actually came out very well in that Supreme Court case. Now there's another case. It's called Espinosa versus Montana Department of Revenue. And the Supreme Court is going to hear this case. It's gone all the way to the Supreme Court and decide whether states can ban students from using student aid programs to attend religious institutions. This money is provided by private organizations. Can it be used all across the board, secular and Christian? And that's what the court will be deciding. And as David Cortman said, it's important for religious liberty. So we'll keep everyone posted.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how this plays out.
So did you go to Christian schools when you were young?
No, so I was a public school kid up until, even in public school up until I graduated high school. Then in college, went to another public school, Austin Peay State University in Tennessee. And my first bit of private school was in seminary at Southwestern Seminary. And I remember, it still seems to me just like yesterday, my very first class at Southwestern, I remember the professor wanted to open up the class, my very first class, with prayer. And as soon as he said, let's pray, I turned around, I was just shocked.
Shocked to your system.
Why? Somebody's going to get in trouble. Well, you can't do that. That's brazen. But nevertheless, I still remember it to this day. And now I'm at Dallas Baptist University, and it really is. It's just a very stark contrast. I'm exceedingly grateful for how teachers have always just been so pivotal in my life, and so especially at Dallas Baptist University, it's just been a very good experience.
Well, we do want to encourage. I really think that there's something to be said with regard to private education, especially today, because it's so hard actually to get your mind around some of the stuff that's taught in public schools. So especially if you're a Christian parent, I think it's important. And it's good, to give people a choice. And sometimes you're paying so much out in tuition when organizations are willing to let money flow to people that are educating their children in the church. I think that ought to be part of our religious liberty, and that's what's going to be considered by the Supreme Court.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm so grateful for. So it took me 23 years to finish school, so I'm a slow guy when it comes to schooling. But I knew that it wasn't just me that got me there. I knew that there were 23 teachers at least that had just really blessed my life. And so I remember I decided that on my last graduation that I would be a part of, I wanted to wait 23 days beforehand, and every day leading up to graduation, I was going to share a story of a teacher all the way started back from kindergarten.
What a great tribute.
And I decided that I wanted to put a clever hashtag behind it, of course, because I'm the millennial. And so I put Teaching Nick was the pits. And so every day for 23 days, I highlighted everyone from Miss Hall in kindergarten to Miss Bell in first grade, to Miss Duke, second grade, up into Dr. Wright, who is a professor at Dallas Baptist University in my life, and wanted just to call out and highlight something that they did in the classroom that really did help me to be able to walk across that stage, just because I knew that I was the only one that was walking across that stage.
I can't remember all my, of course I'm older, but to remember all your teachers from kindergarten on is
one of the unique things, though, that happened because of that is that because many teachers are just so exhausted, the teacher burnout rate, we were talking about blessing your pastors in the previous hour, but teacher burnout rate is it's 50% for those that are in your first 10 years that will burn out. And so it was so rich to be able to see the response from that, because very few of my teachers were actually on social media, or I'm friends with them on social media, though some did write back and express gratitude. But the vast majority of people that expressed gratitude were the teachers that were in my social media ecosystem.
Just to know that you would compliment a teacher.
To know that, days are hard, and to know that I could be doing something really good. And even though this student, because I was not an easy student to teach, even though this student seems so intransigent, even though this student seems so tough, that could be a student that could go on and do something, and I have a small part to play in that. And so that's why so when we go back to the Cortman, David's comment, and I'm so grateful for what they're doing at ADF, is because I want to I think it's just so important here in the U.S. that we allow our teachers to come a part of these villages that we're a part of and help shape this new generation, and to come alongside parents as well in that endeavor.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a comment about teachers, everybody's had a teacher. Yeah. So, if you've got a comment, especially a compliment, I think, one that really influenced your life, that'd be a great call, 800-351-1212. I want to switch gears a little bit before the break, and we'll continue this subject after the break. I was so shocked to see this piece of news. Nick, because Planned Parenthood, of course, is one of the organizations that we cover extensively on Point of View. They get government funding, and they are responsible for influencing our kids and certainly the abortions.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when Cecile Richards, who was president for many years of Planned Parenthood, stepped down, and we saw Leanna Wen step into the position of CEO at Planned Parenthood. There was a shift because Leanna is a doctor.
Yeah.
And she brought, even in her comments from Planned Parenthood, she brought forward the idea that this organization is about health care. I'm a doctor. And she tried to downplay the abortion aspect of it. And so, I have a lot of folks that I know that say, you guys and the conservative movement are way too critical of Planned Parenthood. They do a lot of good things. They do pap smears, and they give people their appointments to help them find out if they're pregnant, and, family planning and all of that. And it's true. They do some of this, but their moneymaker and their big push has been abortion, and it's increased over the years. And this move by Planned Parenthood firing Leanna Wen, I think, bolsters that argument that we were kind of right about them, that they are all about abortion, because the critique of Leanna Wen, Dr. Wen, was that she was not emphasizing abortion enough.
The line that was going around Twitter was she was terminated before term, and how ironic that was to say that. I think you highlight something, that their private strategy became a public mistake with her, in that their private strategy was always to double down and reemphasize the abortion services that they were providing. And with this, you saw Miss Dr. Wen, I want to give her honor where she's due, Dr. Wen, the MD, she wanted to kind of highlight some of the other services that they provided, but that wasn't what Planned Parenthood wanted to do. And due to that, she became another statistic that probably many of our listeners can understand and know. I think the number I highlighted in the daily briefing, 80% of managers and leaders within organizations say they hired the wrong person. And it seems as though Planned Parenthood has hired the wrong person. But in her firing, what we do realize is that we're going against very clearly what they're trying to do. They're trying to provide services that end life, and we're individuals that fight for life. And so that's just another reminder that their leadership is changing, but their mission is not. And for Christians, and then for conservatives as well, it's going to be increasingly important for us not to replicate their tactics, but to be able to do battle in a way that might be able not only to save the child's life, but also bring joy to the mother by not having her engage in some of these services.
One question I might have is, was this sort of a shift in strategy by Planned Parenthood? Because in a sense, it was in a PR, I guess, sense. It was a good move to hire a doctor and emphasize your health care.
Yeah.
Because then you take away some of that stigma about abortion. And yet they switched. And did they switch because there was a switch in the country? That would be maybe something for our callers to weigh in on.
Yeah, and we've got to go to a break, but it does seem like, because we know, especially among millennials, that we're much more pro-life. We're a pro-life generation more than pro-choice. And so callers, you have a chance to chime in. What do you think of the Planned Parenthood change? You can call in at 800-351-1212.
Check out the website, also pointofview.net, for donating to us, and also the action item. We'll be back.
So you sit down and do your budget, and you look at all your monthly costs and your bills and your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. That is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. And when it comes to healthcare sharing ministries, MediShare is really the gold standard. It's been around for 25 years and has more than 400,000 members. It's been around so long and grown so much because it works. And whether you're single or married or have kids, this could make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. $500 a month can more than cover a car payment or pay back loans, whatever. So join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Here's the number to call. They are incredibly kind and helpful to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team. pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And also in studio co-hosting with me today is Nick Pitts. And the really the topic of discussion at the moment is the fact that the head of Planned Parenthood, Leanna Wen, who has been president of the organization for 8 months, was actually forced out yesterday. And it's an interesting phenomenon because it was kind of over the emphasis on abortion. She came in, Nick, and she said, I'm a doctor, and I'm going to talk about all the other services that Planned Parenthood offers, and I'm going to de-emphasize abortion, and that seemed okay for a while, and now it's not. And I wonder, I kind of am guessing that it's partly because the nation has changed. The Democrat Party has doubled down on abortion. You have blue states like New York passing laws that basically just emphasize a right to abortion all the way up to birth, and even after birth in Virginia they were talking about. But and then you have some really strong pro-life laws in Alabama and other states. So you've got this dichotomy in the country, and for the left, it's all about abortion. And so the organization is seeing where I guess maybe it's and I guess they're betting on the left taking power next time too.
It's fascinating. Probably the most, I would argue, the most that epitomized the change that's happened on the ideological left would be former Vice President Biden and his flip-flop on the Hyde Amendment.
Yes.
That would probably be the most significant epitomizing change that's happened on the left, and we've come such a far way from where the Bill Clintons of the world would say they wanted abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. And now we're living in a social media world in which there's the hashtag shout your abortion. And so when Dr. Wen, who was leading Planned Parenthood, when she comes in and wants to continue to emphasize the variety of services that Planned Parenthood provides, well, the leadership of Planned Parenthood, the board, determined otherwise, and so they went in a different direction. And I think this is a unique opportunity, especially for those of us that are on the right, to understand that this is a new demographic, and we are the only party that can appeal to that demographic, apparently, because as we know, with millennials and what the polling indicates is that the vast majority of, I won't say the vast majority, the simple majority of Americans are pro-life. And so how do you continue to emphasize not simply just the saving of the child's life, but also to stand and support mothers? The reality of the matter is that today, if numbers are correct, 2,400 children will be aborted in the womb. And many of these mothers don't think that they can do it. No one's come alongside them and said, you can manage these array of responsibilities and expectations. Probably one of the greatest evangelistic, greatest advocacy efforts that evangelicals, Christians, conservatives can do is to go alongside pregnant mothers and to say, you can do this, and we are a community that can help. And so whether it's, I think there's a great opportunity for us not only to see the extension of the kingdom in this particular issue, but also the extension of the conservative movement as well.
The pregnancy centers across the country are they're more numerous than abortion clinics, and it's becoming an even greater disparity as some of the pro-life laws are actually causing abortion clinics to have to close, and Planned Parenthood facilities now will be closing. And this, I think, is part of Leanna Wen's problem here, because what happened was last week there was a decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Trump administration had put out an executive order which had barred federally funded family planning clinics from providing referrals for abortion. In other words, no federal money could go there, even for the things that are non-abortion, even for the pap smears, even for the pregnancy tests, even for STD testing or any of that. No federal money under this Trump order could go there if that clinic also on the same site provided abortion. And that was under a stay until the Ninth Circuit Court said they lifted that injunction last week. So on Tuesday, it all started, and Planned Parenthood stands to lose up to $60 million, which is a lot of money for them. It's about 10% of all the federal funding they get. So that could have, I think that probably pushed her out. It kind of pushed the board over the line to saying She's got to go.
Yeah, and you know what's so fascinating is obviously there is a bit of, well, if you're a nonprofit entity, which Planned Parenthood is, you've got to raise funds, and if you're not raising the funds, then you gotta find another place to be able to go and fulfill your talents and utilize your gifts and skill sets. But what's fascinating is it all happened so quickly.
I know.
It wasn't even a year. This is it's one thing. She's acting like a millennial. We millennials tend to skip jobs pretty quickly. I think our average tenure is around 18 to 22 months, and so she's this seems to be the pattern of a millennial. But again, one of the things that I think conservatives and Christians can take to heart is what we're seeing is very clearly, just based on the reporting from the Washington Post and others, is that Planned Parenthood is wanting to double down and wanting to emphasize their abortion services that they're providing. And the abortion issue is very clear for Christians, and it's very clear what our mandate is to do. It's to be a voice for the unborn. And so this requires us, as they're going to double down and be loud on the abortion issue, for us to be equally as loud as well for the child in the womb, that this child cannot be silenced, but to hear that baby cry when it exits out is the sound of victory and triumph.
You brought up federal funding of abortion, taxpayer funding of abortion, which, there's a whole issue of conscience in there that was violated by Joe Biden changing his stance on the Hyde Amendment. Because you could be, you have a lot of folks that are quote unquote pro-choice in politics. And they, people could, I guess they could say, and I don't agree with this, but that it's a woman's choice, whether she wants to abort or not. But we, as taxpayers, and this has been kind of the way it's been, don't have to participate in that with our tax dollars. And in this election, abortion is a big issue. I don't quite understand why, because as you said, there's a whole generation, big voting generation that is, showing, all polls show y'all are much more pro-life than your parents.
And, I think that that's one of the things that the Trump administration has just done so well, is they have just been so diligent and so faithful to appoint judges to the courts that are, one, going to faithfully interpret the laws and faithfully apply the laws as they were originally written. And then the second piece is, especially for the life issue, to be able to fight for life. And one of the things that I think, if I could talk to millennials and then even any other age that just want to tune in, is this. Like, I think that there is a political solution to the abortion problem that we're facing right now, but there's also social solutions as well. Yesterday we had on Chelsea Yeoman. She was formerly of the First Liberty Institute, has just made a transition, and she is now going to work for Human Coalition Action. Human Coalition is the gold standard when it comes to the pro-life movement to provide services, but what they've done now is they've got a public policy arm as well. And so I think it's important for us to see that, yes, there are political solutions to this, but there's also there's also just some local, tangible solutions that you can be a part of as well. And I would challenge you to go to humancoalition.org to be able to find out ways in your own community how you might be able to fight the good fight that is helping bring life into this world, so that we might be able to experience the fullness of life in it.
Yeah, and so, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to weigh in on that, do you do anything that, from the social standpoint in your life, to bolster the sanctity of human life? A lot of folks I know worked at pregnancy centers. They've been counselors. I know what my early days of being pro-life, my husband and I would go to these rescues, this group called Operation Rescue. I know you've heard of it. We'd go to the rescues and we would pray we didn't lock arms in front of the clinic to stop people from going in, because we knew you could actually be arrested for doing that. And we didn't want to be arrested, but would go and pray. And these were well attended. You had both sides. So it's kind of exciting to go and be an activist there. But, I have always in my life thought that, it'd be good to be involved in the legislative side of it, to help states restrict abortions. I'd love to see Roe versus Wade overturned, and actually we're at a point now where it's possible. We could see it happen with the way the courts are. But all the restrictions that have been passed by states across the country over the years have made it much rarer. So, folks, if you want to talk about what you think the best way to be pro-life is. Do it. Or if you, we would like to also hear from you if you had an abortion and perhaps want to share that with us. We've had that over the years in our various programs on this issue. But we've got one more segment here on Point of View, and we'll continue our discussion. During the break, you might want to check out pointofview.net. We put up the piece from Life News about the firing of the president of Planned Parenthood. We'll be back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. Nick Pitts is here, and we're talking about the life issue. And, it's an issue that, of course, is near and dear to both of our hearts. And I've been so just so happy to see over the last few years this the polls that show the millennial generation becoming more pro-life. And so I just want to kind of delve into that a little bit more with you, Nick, since you are a millennial.
Oh, I know.
Why?
Here I am.
What happened?
I think one of the what I'm convinced of, one of the aspects as to the reason why that millennials are more pro-life is, I think, one, we've always been kind of a bent on justice. And I think a lot of millennials see this as just a very at the heart of it, a justice issue. So I think you can't help but think that this is an individual, because we believe it to be true, because the science is just so real, that this is a child that is being formed, that can feel, that very much is growing, that's an entity within a woman's body. The idea that it would not be given the right to live just strikes at the very core of what we believe to be true, that it deserves the right. He or she deserves the right to live. And so I think it's a justice issue, one. Two, I go back to what we talked about earlier in the show. Millennials largely view the world primarily through a relational lens. We are just highly relational people. I think that's why there's so much of an interest at the border right now among millennials. That those are people down there. Those are families. Mm-hmm. Those are kids down there. And those could be our neighbors. Those could be our people in our classroom that we share, that we're working with. Those could be people that we eat dinner with at a restaurant. And so the relational aspect brings it closer. And then also, so when you see a child not being given the chance to live, it's a relational thing that we're keenly aware of. And then three, I think the research is clear on this, that abortion is deadly for the child, but it's harmful to the mother. There's increased levels of depression, there's PTSD that increased levels, chances of it afterwards. And we are millennials are largely individuals that have been, I think, really do have what Dr. Martin Luther King said, that we feel the urgency of now, and we don't want to miss out on this moment. And I think one of the ways that's manifested is wanting to squeeze the goodness out of every moment. So those things that might rob us of joy, those things that might steal the happiness in our lives, we want to try to eliminate that. Now, sometimes that's taken in a negative aspect, hence the reason why you're seeing an uptick in drug use, hence the reason why I think you're seeing an uptick in video game playing, just trying to escape from the circumstances and realities of life. But there's also good aspects to it, too. And I think one of the ways that good aspect is being worked out and manifested would be in the pro-life movement as well. So there's a lot to take courage in there. I know that we millennials have got our qualms and problems, but I think there's a lot to it, a lot of benefit to us as well.
So there's a book by a pro-life organization called Aftershocks that kind of just gave me a picture. You know, you have an earthquake and you have all the aftershocks of all the repercussions of abortion and who it impacts. Because, you know, it impacts, of course, the baby that doesn't make it into the world. And then, as you mentioned, the mom and the family, the brothers and sisters. And just, you know, I can go on, and we will in a minute, but talk a little bit about that, because in your generation, a lot of your cohort and a lot of people's brothers and sisters were aborted. They never made it. And does that, perhaps that has sort of a jarring impact that causes you to be more pro-life.
I mean, let's just think about it from just the reality of what we know from social science. This is, of course, we know this from the biblical narrative. From the biblical narrative, we know that a child is a blessing from the Lord. It's a reward. It's a arrow in the quiver of a warrior. We know that a child brings childlike joy into the world. But even in social science, we know this to be true, that even the presence of a child in close proximity tends to elevate moods. Like the child.
Absolutely. I know that from being a grandmother.
The presence of a child tends to turn that frown upside down. And that's just social science research. That's not reading the biblical narrative into this. And what we do know, some of the implications, some of the shocks that are coming from this, it's very clear. We're less happy than what we were 6 years ago. I don't know if there's a direct tie, but I do know that there are less children that are being born today than are being born 6 years ago. The birth rate is down right now. I do know that there's not only is there less children in the world, there's less happiness in the world, and there's an increase in depression that's tended to be on the uptick. There's an increase in suicide rates that's on the uptick right now. There's just an increase in drug. I'm looking at an article right now about the opioid epidemic that's on the rise. Now, I know that I don't want our listener to be confused. There's no scientific ties that would say less children are causing this. I'm just saying that we're just happen to see these lines that are running around. That I think
a culture of death is not a happy culture.
That we need to just be cognizant of. Just to be cognizant. And we all know this to be true. We don't need science to tell us this. We don't need science to tell us that the sound of a child giggling in the background tends to elevate our spirit.
He's got a big smile on his face when he talks
just
about
even
this.
Talking about it, like we know this to be true. And so what can we? And I know, and And hear me, I would dare say that there are probably single mothers that are listening in right now. There might be even a pregnant woman that's listening in right now, trying to think through that one of the top reasons why women get an abortion is because, quote, they're managing an array of responsibilities. They're trying to think through how they can manage an array of responsibilities. And a child is a lot of responsibility. But here's what we know to be true. It's hard to dream about tomorrow when you feel the pressing needs of today. And so what can we do as communities? What can we do as Christians to come alongside these women that are trying to figure out how they can manage an array of responsibilities to alleviate some of the pressing needs of the moment so that they can dream about a future with a child? Now that isn't something that necessarily can be solved politically, but that's a way that socially we can come together and recognize and answer in the affirmative, am I my brother's keeper? Yes.
And that can be done by a church, an organization,
Yes.
or even just you personally can do that.
Mhm.
So there's much opportunity. And I
Mhm.
think we used to call them crisis pregnancies.
Mhm.
Because a woman was in a crisis in her life.
Mhm.
So the abortion decision was sometimes informed by that. I still think we should call it that in a
Mhm.
sense, because it's an opportunity for us to come into the crisis
Yeah.
and help. And sometimes a person could actually find Christ because it's the time when they're pretty much at a low moment, and Christ can be part of the solution. So I'm grateful for the conversation with you, Nick. We had a topic that we didn't cover today, and I want to just point you to the website if you want to read about it, because it was another sort of a current activity by Congress. The House passed a $15 minimum wage, and it's just way too much to get into now. But there's a great article from the Daily Signal about 6 reasons that it's a bad idea. And so go to pointofview.net and check that out. And there's a lot at our website today for you. And one of them, well, all the articles having to do with the topics we discussed today, and this email that you can send to AT&T about HBO's series Euphoria. It's in our show listing of articles. You can click on that or just go directly to the Take Action Now space on our homepage. Both of those will take you there. That's where you can weigh in to ask AT&T, the parent company of HBO, to take this horrible, disgusting, harmful to our young people show off the air. And so we've made it very easy for you. You can go to pointofview.net. And the rest of the week, I don't know, are you in tomorrow, Nick?
I don't know. I have to check.
You don't remember?
No,
You have to check.
actually,
It's Dr.
I'm not.
Merrill
because
Matthews, I think, is hosting tomorrow.
I'm in D.C. tomorrow. So.
All right. Well, you have a great trip to D.C. Dr. Merrill Matthews will be hosting tomorrow. And then, of course, our very popular Friday weekend edition will take place on Friday. I'll actually be in Florida, so you and I are getting on airplanes. But I want to thank Andrew for everything you did today to make the show happen. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great evening.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.